Welcome to my YouTube channel. If you are new to this channel, please subscribe and turn on your notification bell so you're gonna know whenever I drop a new video. If you subscribe, put it down in the comment section by writing I subscribe so that you'll be appreciated. And to my wonderful returning subscribers, you guys are the best. So in today's video, we'll be talking about blood supply or blood flow to the brain. The heart pumps about 5 liters of blood per minute, and 15% of this blood goes to the brain because of the important and numerous work the brain does. And in explaining this blood flow to the brain, there are many structures, important structures that we'll be needing. Number one is arc of aorta, because of the 3 great arteries that emanated from this arc, which are bicephalic artery, which now subdivided into the right subclavian artery and right common carotid artery, and we have the left common carotid artery and left subclavian artery. We also make use of the vertebrae, that is the cervical vertebrae, and we'll be needing the brain stem. We'll be needing them, which comprises of the pons, medulla oblongata, cerebellum, and the midbrain. And we also be needing the cranium, some diagram of circle of Willis because it's kind of important. So this blood flow to the brain is divided into 2 systems: the carotid system or the anterior system and the cerebrovascular system, which is also known as the posterior system. Make sure you watch to the end of this video. Let's discuss cerebrovascular system first, the posterior part. 2 vertebral artery, that is the right and left vertebral artery, are branches from the right and left subclavian artery that emanated from the arc of aorta. So this vertebral artery then moves up, moves along the transverse process, and when it reaches the 6 that we are talking about, the cervical vertebrae, when it reaches C6, it enters these arteries, the right and left vertebral arteries, now enter into the transverse foramen, and it continues to move. When it now reaches the C1, the atlas, it now enters into the foramen magnum. After that, now it will now enter into the cranial cavity, when it will now become one. If it reaches, it becomes one when it reaches the pontomedullary junction to form basilar artery. And this basilar artery now divide into the posterior, that is the 2 posterior cerebral artery, because it's now in the brain. Talking about the cerebrum, divide into 2 posterior cerebral artery, that is the right and left posterior cerebral artery. We are done with the posterior system. I'm going to talk about some special arteries, other arteries that are formed alongside in this vertebrovascular artery. Number 1 is the vertebral artery moves backward to form the anterior spinal artery, which supply the thoracic vertebrae 4 to lumbar vertebrae 1, T4 to L1, and also it also forms the posterior spinal artery, which supply blood to thoracic vertebrae 1 to 3, T1 to T3, and the rest of the vertebrae, what is going to supply them? There comes segmental artery, which supplies the rest of the spinal cord. Rest of the spinal cord. This segmental artery consists of deep cervical artery, the lumbar artery, and costal arteries. That is what consists of this segmental artery. And also the vertebral artery also have a branch called the posterior inferior cerebellum. I'm talking about cerebellum now. Posterior inferior cerebellar artery, which supply blood to the posterior aspect of the cerebellum. And now in the proximal aspect of basilar artery, another artery is
called the anterior inferior cerebellar artery, AICA, which supply the anterior inferior aspect of the cerebellum. The basilar artery also form an artery called labyrinthine artery. It's a very long artery that passes through the internal acoustic meatus to supply blood to the inner ear.
We also have smaller arteries, which are the paramedians and pontine arteries. Supplies blood to the pons.
At the superior aspect of the cerebellum, the basilar artery leaves an artery called the superior cerebellar artery, which supply the superior aspect of the cerebellum, and another artery called ophthalmic artery, which supply the eye and goes to the retina to form an artery called central retinal artery. A very interesting thing about this artery, that is central retinal artery, is that whenever there is thrombus in the blood vessel, it goes to the central retinal artery to cause blindness.
You know the common carotid system, right and left common carotid system, further divide into or have branch, which is the external and internal carotid artery. The external carotid artery supply the face, while the internal carotid artery supply the neck and the brain. So this internal carotid artery, it enters the brain and passes through the carotid canal and come out from foramen lacerum. It now moves into venous sinus in the brain and now pierces the dura mater. You know meninges now. It pierces the dura mater
until it reaches the subarachnoid space. The arteries that supply the brain fluid and cerebrospinal fluid, which is contained in the subarachnoid space. A very important thing about this is when there is aneurysm, that is abnormal dilatation of blood vessel, you get to see subarachnoid hemorrhage when there is rupture of this blood vessel.
The internal carotid artery then form the right and left anterior cerebral artery, not cerebellum now, because we are talking about brain. Right and left anterior cerebral artery, and they are now joined together by anterior communicating artery. So let me use my hand as the anterior. These two finger pointing up is the two right and left anterior cerebral artery, while this one now is the anterior communicating artery. And remember that the basilar artery divide into two posterior cerebral artery. So this one down now are the two posterior cerebral artery, while this one now is the posterior communicating artery, which joins the two posterior cerebral artery. And we have the medial artery that supply the medial cerebral artery, that supply the medial aspect of the cerebrum, and a branch of this internal carotid artery comes along also to help in blood supply. So this ring now that is formed is called circle of release. We said that the internal carotid artery divide into right and left anterior artery, which are joined by anterior communicating artery, and the basilar artery now. The basilar artery divide into two posterior arteries, which is the right and left posterior cerebral artery, and they are now joined by one posterior communicating artery, and we have the medial cerebral artery, which supply the medial aspects, and branch of internal carotid artery, which also help out in forming circle of release. Anterior cerebral artery supply blood to the anterior aspect of the cerebrum. The posterior cerebral artery supply blood to the posterior aspect of the cerebrum. The middle cerebral artery supply blood to the middle aspect of the cerebrum, while the internal carotid artery also help form the circle of release. So let's recap what we've learned. I said something about vertebral artery. We have the two vertebral artery to move and form the basilar artery, and the basilar artery will now form the two posterior cerebral artery. But before then, the vertebral artery forms anterior spinal artery and also the posterior spinal artery. The pica, which is the posterior inferior cerebellar artery. We also have the ica, which is the anterior inferior cerebellar artery, and we have labyrinthine, which is a branch from basilar artery, which supplies the inner ear. The basilar artery also forms the pontine arteries, which supply the bones. That is for vertebral basilar artery, which is the posterior system. Now coming to the anterior system, which is the carotid system. The internal carotid artery divide or form the two anterior cerebral artery, which is joined by one anterior communicating artery, and we also have the medial cerebral artery, which supply the medial aspects, and a branch, because the internal carotid artery also help in forming the circle of release, because it's kind of supply blood to the brain. And the basilar artery now, the two posterior artery from the basilar artery is now joined by one posterior communicating artery to form the circle of release, which is also known as circulus arteriosus. Thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe, like and share. Turn on your notification bell so you know whenever I drop a new video. Please subscribe. After subscribing, you put it down in the comment section. I subscribe.